Hey, what's going on? It's Patrick Bentley from TechPeer. Just wanted to make a quick video. Today I talked to a friend of mine who has been working on an app for the last 2 years with an offshore development team, and he did not have his own source code for his app. I've also seen a lot of talk lately about non-technical founders and whether they need to go and find a technical founder, whether they should just build the app on their own using offshore development, or even you could use no code tools. So there's a lot of different ways that we can solve this problem. But overall, one of the things that you definitely need to do, no matter what avenue you use to solve this problem, is make sure that you have control of the source code, right? The source code is what we're going to deploy to the app stores. It's what we're going to deploy to AWS or somewhere else, some hosting, Heroku, whatever, to actually run your code, right? To actually run your app. So this is the heart of your business, particularly if you have a tech-centered business, right? So as a non-technical founder, a lot of times people don't know how they should be doing that. So let's dive in. So what you need to do if you're a non-technical founder to make sure that you have access to your code and that you have control over it is you need to have a code repository, right? Now, one of the most popular code repositories is GitHub. So right now we're on the GitHub homepage, and you can really think of GitHub as basically just a place where we can store code and we can actually collaborate on that code. We can share it with team members. We can share it if we're open sourcing it, we can share it with the world. But essentially think of this as like social media for developers, right? Think of it like Facebook for developers. That's a very simplistic understanding of it, but at a base level, this is a place where we can store our code and we can share it with others, and we can control who we share it to. But this is what you are going to need in order to make sure that you have access to your own repository, right? So there's a lot more. I mean, we can spend hours and hours just talking about GitHub, but for the purpose of, non-tech founders and people who aren't really, coding, just know that GitHub is where we likely are going to want to store our code, right? And so you, as the non-technical founder, need to make sure that you set up a GitHub account, right? So go ahead and register for that account. You can sign up for one right there, absolutely free, right? And then once you sign up for your account, then inside of your account, you can create what we call repositories or repos for short, right? So this is my personal GitHub account. A lot of this stuff has been so long ago, man. I really don't code too much anymore. And when I do, it's not for myself. And so I don't really have a lot of contributions. I do have a lot of repos, but most of the stuff that I'm doing these days, I'm not really doing the coding day to day, but you do see that I have some stuff. So let's see what a repo actually looks like when we go into it. So this is a repo, right? So the repo is basically where I can push my code, right? And let's just take a look. This is actually pretty old, but it'll have all of the folders and the code and everything else that I'm using for my application, right? So let's just jump into this and let's see what's in here, right? So you can see that there's just the actual code, right? So what you want to do is once you create your account, what you're going to want to do is you're going to create a repository. You're going to create a repo. So you can do that by clicking here. There's also a button here, but you want to start a new repo. And then what you want to do is you want to give your repo a name, right? And so we'll just call this test repo. And you can give it a decision. You can toggle whether you want it to be public or private, right? A README file is just, think of this as a file with instructions on it. And then you create that repository, right? Now, once you create that repository, then what you can do is you can actually then run a couple of commands in the command line, and you can actually set this up. But what you would want to do is you'd actually want to make sure that you copy this URL right here and give that to your developer and say, hey, this is where I want you to push my code, right? Now, what you need to do is go into settings, go to collaborators, and then you can actually add people by email or username if they already have a GitHub account. If you're working with experienced developers, they will absolutely have a company GitHub account. They'll likely have a personal GitHub account. So that's actually a red flag, to be honest. If I was working with a developer who did not want to put my source code or something that he's working on for me in a GitHub repo, then that's a red flag. If they don't use GitHub, that's a red flag. Unless they're using some other type of code repo. There are others, including some stuff for AWS like Code Commit, a few other places, but everybody uses GitHub, right? So another thing that you want to make sure that you understand is how do you actually pull down your code and run your code, right? So there are GitHub tutorials that GitHub has, and make sure that you have those. But usually, and this is another thing that you should request of your developer, that README file that I mentioned earlier. So this is a README file, and it's basically just a markdown file. And what we use it for is we use it as a way for us to write instructions so that we know, or if you need to onboard new developers, if you yourself want to test your code, then you can run these instructions and you'll be able to run the application locally, right? So just a few things that you want to know, but overall, make sure you got a GitHub account. Make sure that the developers that you're using are coding inside of your repo, inside of your account. And that way, if you ever run into problems, you'll be able to get rid of people, but you ultimately will have all of the code. And then when you need to bring on people, other developers, you bring on a technical co-founder. It's a much easier process and a much easier transition if you've already got your code sitting somewhere. So quick tidbit, just make sure you have that, especially if you're non-technical. Hey, if you need some help with this kind of stuff, as always, you can reach out to me, reach out to TechPeer, techpeerconsulting.com. Until next time, see y'all later.